and what the USNI News Fleet and Marine Tracker published on March 2nd on February 28th. The Pentagon denied the claim immediately, but here is what the Pentagon did not deny, and what the USNI News Fleet and Marine Tracker published on March 2nd in its verified, named position-by-position accounting of every U.S. naval asset in the region, the USS Abraham Lincoln, which had been operating at a forward standoff position approximately 500 miles from Iran's southern coast since early February, has repositioned. Defense Security Asia confirmed the repositioning, citing Iranian Revolutionary March 6th, 2000. March 6th, 2000. March 6th, 2000. March 6th. March 6th, 2026. On March 5th, 2026, 24 hours ago, the Iranian regime issued a statement claiming it had struck the USS Abraham Lincoln with a series of drone attacks in the Arabian Sea, following the most intense wave of American bombing raids on Tehran since Operation Epic Fury began on February 28th. The Pentagon denied the claim immediately, but here is what the Pentagon did not deny, and what the USNI News Fleet and Marine Tracker published on March 2nd in its verified, named position-by-position accounting of every U.S. naval asset in the region, the USS Abraham Lincoln, which had been operating at a forward standoff position approximately 500 miles from Iran's southern coast since early February, has repositioned. Defense Security Asia confirmed the repositioning, citing Iranian Revolutionary Guard General Sardar Nainini's public declaration that, quote, the USS Abraham Lincoln fled to the southeast of the Indian Ocean. CENTCOM did not confirm that framing, but it also did not release updated carrier coordinates contradicting it. And what retired Navy fighter pilot Jim Kidrick told NBC San Diego on March 4th is the sentence that unlocks the entire story of why American carrier doctrine has been under quiet. Extraordinary pressure since Operation Epic Fury began. He said, this is that floating city, and it steams and ready on arrival to go into combat. He was right. But what he did not say, because it is the thing naval planners discuss in classified briefings and almost never on camera, is that a floating city can also be steamed out. And the reason it gets steamed out is not because the enemy can sink it. It is because the enemy has a specific category of missile that the entire American carrier defense architecture was not fully designed to stop. The category does not have an official public name, but inside naval planning circles, the word used informally is squirter. And understanding what a squirter is, how Iran built one, and why the existence of even a small number of them changes the entire calculus of forward carrier deployment is the story that the live coverage of Operation Epic Fury has completely failed to explain. Here is what the word squirter means in the context of naval missile defense, and why it matters more than any individual weapon system Iran has fired in the past 6 days. Every carrier strike group in the United States Navy is defended by what the Navy calls a layered air and missile defense architecture. The outermost layer consists of FA-18E and F Super Hornets and F-35C fighters flying combat air patrol, capable of intercepting threats at range before they reach the strike group. The next layer consists of Standard Missile 6 interceptors launched from Aegis-equipped destroyers and cruisers that can engage threats at long range and high altitude. Closer in, Standard Missile 2 interceptors provide a second intercept opportunity. Closer still, the evolved Sea Sparrow missile handles shorter range threats. And at point-blank range, the Phalanx close-in weapon system fires 3,000 rounds per minute at any threat that has penetrated every other layer. This architecture, according to 1945's March 2nd analysis of Iran's carrier strike capabilities, can track over 100 targets simultaneously and is designed to handle saturation attacks involving multiple simultaneous incoming missiles from different vectors. The system is genuinely formidable. The USS Thomas Hudner successfully engaged a short-range ballistic missile with an SM-6 in a live-fire 6th Fleet exercise in European waters as recently as May 2025, according to 1945. These are not theoretical capabilities. They are tested, exercised, and real. And yet the system has a specific, documented, probabilistic vulnerability that Iran has spent the better part of a decade engineering a missile to exploit. That vulnerability is what produces squirters. A squirter is a missile that gets through, not because the defense system failed catastrophically, but because the mathematics of layered interception against maneuvering ballistic threats mean that no system achieves 100% success against every possible attack profile. A squirter is the missile that the statistics say will occasionally penetrate. And what Iran has built, confirmed by multiple named defense publications over the past week, is a family of missiles specifically optimized to maximize the probability of being that missile. The Army Recognition Group published its assessment of Iran's layered anti-ship missile architecture on March 3rd 2026, drawing on classified threat assessments and technical analysis. AUS. It describes the weapon that makes carrier planners most uncomfortable with surgical precision. The Khalij Fars, which translates from Persian as Persian Gulf, is assessed as having a range of approximately 300 kilometers, and a maneuvering reentry vehicle equipped with an electro-optical seeker for terminal guidance against moving ships. I read that description carefully, because each technical term in it corresponds directly to a specific failure mode in the Aegis intercept chain. The range of 300 kilometers means it can be launched from well inside Iran's hardened coastal infrastructure, from positions that American strike aircraft must first suppress before they are silenced. The maneuvering re-entry vehicle means the missile does not fly a predictable ballistic arc, that Aegis computers can calculate and intercept cleanly. It maneuvers. It changes trajectory in the terminal phase of flight, the critical window when standard missile interceptors are making their final engagement geometry calculation. And the electro-optical seeker means the guidance system is actively looking at the ship in its terminal phase, correcting its flight path in real time based on what it sees, rather than relying on pre-programmed coordinates that electronic warfare suites can potentially deceive. Army Recognition's assessment states the implication directly. A ballistic terminal dive at high supersonic speed drastically shortens engagement timelines. For U.S. naval forces, this means compressed decision cycles. For Iran, the value lies in saturation and ambiguity, pairing ballistic threats with cruise missiles, drones, and swarming surface craft to overload sensors and deplete magazine depth. That word, magazine depth, is the second concept that is essential to understanding why American carriers have repositioned and why Bloomberg's March 5th analysis, published just yesterday, stated that Trump's suggestion to escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz may potentially bring Iran's anti-ship missiles into play in ways that add a fundamentally new dimension to a conflict largely defined so far by air power. A carrier strike group carries a finite number of interceptor missiles. Each Aegis destroyer in the Abraham Lincoln's escort, the USS Spruance, the USS Frankie Peterson Jr., the USS Michael Murphy, all of which USNI News confirmed are part of the Lincoln's strike group in the Arabian Sea as of March 2nd, carries a vertical launch system with a limited number of cells, SM-6 missiles, SM-2 missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, and other munitions all compete for those cells. The Lincoln Strike Group has been firing Tomahawk missiles at Iranian targets since February 28th, confirmed by Pentagon video releases and Axios San Diego's March 3rd reporting. Every Tomahawk fired in the offense is a cell that is no longer available for defense. This is the magazine drain strategy that Army Recognition's March 3rd analysis identifies as the core of Iran's anti-access and area denial architecture. Iran does not need to sink a carrier. Iran needs to fire enough missiles, drones, and swarming boats at enough American ships, often enough that the mathematics of magazine depth begin to work in Iran's favor. The critical threats assessment published on March 2nd stated that Iranian Shahed drones are, in the words of U.S. sources speaking to a journalist, I quote, so far the most dangerous threat, because the sources stated that Iranian Shahed drones are getting through some air defenses. Not ballistic missiles, drones. Relatively cheap, relatively slow, relatively easy to intercept individually. But there are a lot of them, and each one that gets through represents a defensive missile expended on interception. By March 3rd, the IDF had destroyed approximately half of Iran's missile launchers according to critical threats, and the decrease in Iranian missile attacks against Israel strongly suggests the effort to destroy launchers has had considerable success. But the operative word is approximately half. The other half remains. And what remains includes systems that the Army Recognition analysis, drawing on IRGC technical documentation, describes as specifically hardened, dispersed, and decentralized against exactly the kind of suppression campaign that Operation Epic Fury has been executing for the past 6 days. Here is the specific weapon that changed the carrier vulnerability equation in ways that even the Khalij Fars alone could not. Yes, and that the National's reporting from March 2nd described as a game changer that a senior analyst at the Royal United Services Institute called specifically threatening to aircraft carriers in the region. In 2023, China developed a supersonic cruise missile whose export variant is called the CM-302. The National confirmed it carries a 500-kilogram warhead, travels at 5,000 kilometers per hour, and can perform evasive maneuvers to avoid anti-missile threats during its terminal approach. Dr. Alessandro Arduino of RUSI told The National, "We are talking about a game-changer missile system. It is a supersonic cruise missile, meaning that it goes at normal missile speed, then nearby the target. It increases the speed to supersonic, making it very difficult to intercept, especially if you have a barrage mixed with drones. The CM-302's combination of high speed, heavy warhead, and terminal maneuvering places it directly in the category that produces squirters. It does not rely on overwhelming numbers alone. It relies on the physics of interception geometry. An Aegis interceptor closing at its maximum velocity against a target closing at 5,000 kilometers per hour and maneuvering in its terminal phase has a mathematically constrained engagement window measured in fractions of a second. The question is not whether Aegis can engage it. The question is whether every single one gets intercepted in a saturation scenario where it arrives alongside ballistic missiles from one vector, Shahed drones from another vector, and swarming fast attack boats probing the defensive perimeter from a third. That is the architecture. And that is the architecture whose existence drove the repositioning of the Abraham Lincoln away from the Chabahar adjacent maritime corridor, where it had maintained its forward standoff posture. The Army recognition analysis published on March 3rd states the strategic implication of that repositioning with the kind of precision that live news coverage does not have time to develop. It reads, the repositioning of the USS Abraham Lincoln effectively ceded immediate tactical initiative within the Chabahar adjacent maritime corridor, granting IRGC naval elements uncontested maneuver space inside their preferred engagement envelope. The 250 to 300 kilometer line off Iran's coast now functions, in that analysis's words, as a proven risk boundary rather than a theoretical map reference, embedding a new operational memory into naval planning cycles. That phrase, a proven risk boundary, is the most important phrase in the entire carrier repositioning story. It does not say the carrier was hit. It does not say the carrier was forced to retreat by a successful Iranian strike. It says that the 300 kilometer line, the engagement range of the Khalij Fars with its maneuvering electro-optical seeker, is now a boundary that American naval commanders have demonstrated through their own repositioning decisions that they take seriously as a genuine operational constraint. And that demonstration, confirmed by IRGC General Nainini's public statement about the carrier fleeing to the southeast, has been received by every naval planning staff in the world as a data point about forward carrier deployment doctrine in the era of precision coastal missile defense. Drop a comment right now. Do you think the Abraham Lincoln's repositioning represents a temporary tactical adjustment or a permanent shift in how American carriers operate near adversaries with advanced coastal missile systems? And if this analysis is giving you the technical picture that the live conflict coverage is not stopping long enough to explain, let's hit the like button, because what we are going to go into next is the layer that explains why the carrier's repositioning is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a much larger question about interceptor stockpiles, B-2 bomber operations against deeply buried launchers, and whether Operation Epic Fury's campaign to destroy Iran's missile infrastructure is succeeding fast enough to change the threat calculus before it matters. Here's what the joint U.S. and Israeli campaign has actually accomplished against Iran's missile infrastructure in the 6 days since February 28th, and here is where the data from named, sourced, verified reporting tells a story that is more nuanced than either the Iranian information warfare narrative about carrier strikes or the American official narrative about Iran's combat power diminishing. Critical threats reported on March 2nd, drawing on commercially available satellite imagery, that the combined U.S. and Israeli force struck the missile base near Najafabad in Isfahan province, showing 3 impact points likely caused by bunker buster bombs. The IDF also struck the Yaz missile base in Yaz province and the Korgu missile base north of Bandar Abbas in Hormozgan province, which is the province that contains Iran's primary southern naval infrastructure. Satellite imagery confirmed commercially available impacts at all 3 locations. Defensive Scoop reported on March 5th that US B-2 Spirit stealth bombers dropped dozens of 2,000-pound penetrator bombs, targeting deeply buried ballistic missile launchers. I was CENTCOM Admiral Brad Cooper stating during a press briefing at CENTCOM headquarters in Tampa that in just the last 72 hours, America's bomber force has struck nearly 200 targets deep inside Iran, including around Tehran. The same Defense Scoop report confirmed the combat debut of the precision strike missile known as PRSM, a ground-launched ballistic missile developed by Lockheed Martin with a range of at least 500 kilometers that was specifically designed to counter adversary anti-access and area denial capabilities. The PRSM was fired into Iran from positions across the Persian Gulf, its first use in actual combat. By March 1st, according to Critical Threats, citing IDF assessments, approximately half of Iran's ballistic missile launchers had been destroyed. These are real accomplishments. They're confirmed by named sources, satellite imagery, and named Pentagon officials on camera, and they matter enormously for the trajectory of the conflict. But here's the part that CENTCOM's briefing did not address, and that Defense Scoop's March 5th reporting captured in a single sentence that deserves a great deal of attention. The scope of Operation Epic Fury has raised concerns about the United States' munitions stockpiles and the defense industrial base's ability to rapidly replenish the weapons spent in Iran. That concern is real. Tomahawk missiles cost approximately $1.8 million each, according to Defense Department procurement data. SM-6 interceptors cost approximately $4.8 million each. The PRSM costs between $1.6 million and $3.5 million per unit based on production volume. According to Defense Scoop, in the Army's fiscal year 2026 budget included funds to procure just 45 of the missiles. 45. The United States fired an unknown but significant number of these weapons in the opening days of Epic Fury alongside hundreds of other precision munitions. The Defense Industrial Base, which has already been strained by weapons deliveries to Ukraine and Taiwan, does not restock these inventories overnight. The magazine drain concern that Army recognition identified as Iran's core strategic objective cuts both ways. Iran is trying to drain American interceptor magazines with drone and missile salvos. America is draining Iran's launcher inventory with B-2 bombers and PRSM strikes. The question of which depletion curve runs out first is not rhetorical. It is the central military planning question of Operation Epic Fury's second week. The Diplomat published on March 5th the development that most directly expands the geographic scope of the carrier and naval power story beyond the Arabian Sea. On March 4th, a United States military submarine struck and sank the Iris Dana, Iran's most modern Mauj-class frigate, approximately 40 nautical miles off the southern coast of Sri Lanka. The vessel had 180 crew aboard and was operating in the Indian Ocean as part of Iran's long-range naval posture when it sent a distress call before sinking. The Iris Dana was approximately 4,000 nautical miles from the Persian Gulf when it was destroyed. The Diplomat's analysis notes that when Operation Epic Fury began, most strategic observers framed the conflict in familiar terms as a Middle East theater war. Within hours, Iran had lashed out, striking across 10 countries. The conflict expanded as far as Cyprus within days, and now the naval dimension has extended to the Indian Ocean. Iran's answer to the carrier strike group's repositioning eastward was to have its own naval vessels operating in those same waters. The submarine that sank the Iris Dana resolved that problem by extending the American kill chain to match the geographic expansion of Iranian naval presence. But the sinking also confirms what the Diplomat's analysis concludes. The framing of this conflict as a bounded Middle East theater war is now obsolete. Operation Epic Fury has left the Middle East. It is a global naval conflict in its early days. Here is the specific data on what Iran's Squirter missile architecture means for the Strait of Hormuz, the waterway through which 20% of global daily oil supply passes, and whose operational status Bloomberg identified on March 5th as the central economic risk dimension of Operation Epic Fury's escalation. Army Recognition's March 3rd analysis confirms that Iran's naval and air defense strategy fuses mines, submarines, coastal anti-ship crews, and ballistic missiles, swarm tactics, and layered surface-to-air missiles to turn the Strait of Hormuz into what it calls a high-risk magazine drain fight, designed to pressure U.S. carriers, Aegis destroyers, tankers, and supporting reconnaissance and tanker aircraft through saturation and dispersed survival launchers. The Noor and Qatar anti-ship cruise missile families, derived from Chinese C-802 technology, are sea-skimming missiles with reported ranges between 200 and 300 kilometers and warheads of around 200 kilograms in the Qatar configuration. They are deployable from mobile coastal launchers, surface vessels, and selected aircraft. The Abu Mahdi anti-ship missile, which Army Recognition analyzed in a separate March 2026 assessment, is described as optimized for damaging large surface combatants rather than small patrol vessels. Its assessment notes that even without sinking a ship, a successful strike that turns off propulsion, sensors, or flight deck operations could remove a high-value American asset from the fight for an extended period, and that strategically, the political and operational impact of such damage would far outweigh the purely tactical effect, particularly during a crisis in which naval presence serves as a key instrument of deterrence. That assessment is the technical articulation of why the carrier repositioned, not because Iran can sink the Lincoln, but because a single hit that takes the flight deck offline for 72 hours removes the carrier's air wing from the fight at a critical moment, and the Abraham Lincoln's air wing, confirmed by USNI News as including F-A-18E and F-Super Hornets and F-35C fighters from multiple named squadrons, is currently the mobile airbase that allows American strike aircraft to operate closer to Iranian targets without the need for a land base, as retired Navy pilot Jim Kidrick told NBC San Diego. In my view, the story of the carrier's repositioning and the Squirter missile threat is not ultimately a story about one ship or one weapon system. It is a story about the collision between two competing doctrines that have been on a path toward this test for 15 years. American carrier strike group doctrine is built on the assumption that layered, multi-tier missile defense creates an essentially impenetrable envelope around the carrier. Iranian anti-access and area denial doctrine is built on the assumption that if you build enough maneuvering, high-speed, multi-vector threats to simultaneously saturate every layer of that envelope at the right moment, the mathematics of interception probability will eventually produce a squirter. The Khalij-Fars electro-optical terminal seeker is designed to produce squirters. The CM-302 supersonic cruise missile's terminal acceleration from cruise speed to Mach 4 is designed to produce squirters. The Fata-2 hypersonic missile, which Iran's state broadcaster confirmed was used in retaliation strikes, and which Pravda EN's March 2nd technical analysis describes as reaching speeds between Mach 13 and 15 with a maneuvering warhead designed specifically to defeat THAAD and Arrow 3 intercept geometry, is designed to produce squirters. Each of these systems alone, in a one-on-one engagement, is likely to be intercepted by Aegis. The American system is that good. But in a coordinated saturation attack where all three arrive simultaneously from different vectors alongside Shahed drones that are already confirmed by US sources to be getting through some air defenses, the probability that all of them are intercepted approaches zero.
Supporting the channel is as easy as a finger tap. Free to follow, free to like. Supporting the channel is as easy as a finger tap. Free to follow, free to like.
And it is the carrier commander's responsibility to the 5,500 sailors aboard that ship and to the president who authorized their deployment to not allow the probability calculation to be tested. Watch 3 indicators in the coming 72 hours that will tell you whether the Squirter missile threat has been degraded enough by Operation Epic Fury's campaign against Iranian launchers to allow the Abraham Lincoln to return to its forward operating position, or whether the repositioning represents something more permanent. Watch CENTCOMs. Battle damage assessment of Iran's remaining coastal anti-ship missile infrastructure, specifically the mobile launcher dispersal sites along Iran's southern coast between Bandar Abbas and Chabahar. If Admiral Brad Cooper's briefings confirm that the Khalij-Fars, Noor, Qatar, and Abu Mahdi launcher sites have been suppressed to the same degree that Iran's ballistic missile launchers appear to have been.
Supporting the channel is as easy as a finger tap. Free to follow, free to like. Supporting the channel is as easy as a finger tap. Free to follow, free to like.
As of March 1st, when critical threats estimated approximately half had been destroyed, then the 300-kilometer risk boundary begins to recede, and forward carrier deployment becomes tactically viable again. Watch whether Bloomberg's reporting on tanker escorts through the Strait of Hormuz produces any public naval deployment orders that would place American destroyer assets inside the 300-kilometer coastal missile engagement envelope without the carrier present. That decision, if it is made, will reveal exactly how the Pentagon's internal assessment of the remaining Squirter threat has evolved since the repositioning. And watch the USNI News Fleet and Marine Tracker's next published update, which, as of March 2nd, confirmed the Abraham Lincoln Strike Group's exact composition in the Arabian Sea, including the USS Spruance, USS Michael Murphy, and USS Frank E. Peterson Jr., alongside 6 independently deployed guided missile destroyers, and the Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group operating separately in the Eastern Mediterranean. If those compositions change, if destroyers are pulled back from independent Arabian Sea deployment, or if the
F-35, the most expensive fighter jet ever built. $80 million of stealth technology designed to be invisible. Iran says it shot one down. Tehran claims its air defenses brought down an American F-35 and 4 advanced combat drones over Iranian skies on Thursday, and then issued a warning that should concern every capital watching this war. What comes next will be stronger, wider, and more relentless. The United States denied losing any aircraft. Iran offered no wreckage, no serial numbers, no proof. But Tehran was not finished talking. A senior military official said the coming days would bring the most intense phase of the war yet. If that is posturing, it is calibrated posturing. And if it is not, this conflict is about to get significantly worse. The claim came from Lieutenant Colonel Ibrahim Zolfagari, spokesperson for Iran's Qatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters. He said Iranian air defenses intercepted 1 F-35 fighter jet and 4 advanced reconnaissance and combat drones, including what he described as Hermes 900 and MQ-9 platforms, over the western, southwestern, and southern regions of the country. An F-35 costs roughly $80 million, and losing one in this context would carry significant strategic and political implications, analysts say. Tehran knows that, which is why the claim, verified or not, is designed to serve a purpose. Signal to a domestic audience that Iran can still fight back, and plant doubt internationally about the
Supporting the channel is as easy as a tap of your finger, completely free. Supporting the channel is as easy as a tap of your finger, completely free.
cost of this campaign. But Zolfagari did not stop at the shoot-down claim. Zolfagari warned that the trend of attacks will become more intense and widespread in the coming days, he said. The cowardly military forces and facilities of the Zionist regime have hidden in civilian and public layers, but the detection and striking of the aggressors will continue. That language does two things. It frames Israeli military assets as hiding behind civilians, and it prepares the ground for strikes that may hit civilian areas, preemptively shifting blame. The accusation is significant because it mirrors language typically used by Israel.
Dolandırıcılığından zarar gören herkese dikkat.
Against Hamas and Hezbollah. Tehran is inverting the framing, casting Israel as the party using human shields. Whether there is evidence to support the claim is unclear. No satellite imagery, no coordinates, no independent assessment has been offered. But in an information war running alongside the kinetic one, the accusation itself becomes a weapon. The strikes continued in both directions. Israeli airstrikes struck targets in Tehran and Beirut on Friday, according to multiple reports. The IDF said it targeted military infrastructure across Tehran and Hezbollah positions in Beirut. The geographic spread of the campaign has not contracted since the war began. It has expanded. Tehran, Beirut, Erbil, Kuwait, the Gulf. Every day, the map of this conflict grows wider. At sea, the campaign intensified as well.
Supporting the channel is as easy as a tap of your finger, completely free. Supporting the channel is as easy as a tap of your finger, completely free.
Ayı kafayla kaybettim dost akrabayı.
Tahran. Arkadaşlar, Türkçe bilen varsa ekrana çift tıklayabilir. Kanala destek için abone olabilirsiniz. Abonelik ücretsiz. Kimseden ücret istemiyorum. 1000 abone olamadığımız için 500 izleyiciyi geçemiyoruz. Kısıtlama geliyor.
You can support the channel by subscribing. It's free. You can support the channel by subscribing. It's free.
destruction demolition site in the middle of Ramat Gan, a civilian area that was attacked by the Iranian regime and destroyed a lot of buildings and hurt innocent civilians who were sitting in the houses eating their Shabbat meals. And suddenly a missile hit their house, and some of them were injured, some of them are trapped, and we are here to rescue them and take them out.
I can tell you that we do have a number of injured, but I can't go into detail of the exact number or the exact location, as I said. What I can also tell you, though, is that the Israel Police Bomb Disposal Units are here on this site and multiple other sites. They're some of the best in the world. We're doing everything possible to ensure the safety of the public. We just ask for the public's cooperation. Do your part. Your responsibility can save your life and other lives as well.
öder.
Shifting and markets are trembling, but amidst the chaos, the biggest wild card sits in Washington. American President Donald Trump. His flip-flops are keeping the world totally guessing. First he says it's too late for talks, then he says we're negotiating. From no boots on the ground to considering full-scale invasion. Kabhi haan, kabhi na is what we are getting to hear. The latest U-turn comes on sanctions for importing Russian oil. After thundering threats of 500% tariffs on India, now America has waived off this sanction for India again. Remember, the missiles of Iran have struck not just US and Israeli establishments, but also at the very heart of global energy security. The Ras Tanura oil refinery in Saudi Arabia has been struck along with 2 petroleum plants in Qatar. In fact, in UAE, the Fujairah and Mustafa oil terminals have also been hit. In Oman, there is damage to fuel tanks across 2 ports. And the worst blow to the supply chain has been the virtual blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, where 9 tankers have been sunk to the bottom of the ocean. In fact, perhaps this is the reason that the United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent now says that to enable oil to keep flowing into the global markets, US is issuing a temporary 30-day waiver to allow
Its priority is protection, not escalation, even as tensions spiral.
The United Kingdom played no role in these strikes, but we have long been clear. The regime in Iran is utterly abhorrent. Our forces are active, and British planes are in the sky today as part of coordinated regional defensive operations to protect our people, our interests, and our allies, as Britain has done before, in line with international law. We've stepped up protections for British bases and personnel to their highest level.
The escalation follows waves of US and Israeli strikes that reportedly eliminated senior Iranian leadership, including Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Iran has responded with missile and drone attacks across the Middle East, closing airspace in multiple countries and raising fears of a wider regional war. British officials warn further retaliation cannot be ruled out, as energy markets and global security hang in the balance.
Açmaya gerçekten emin misin? Korkarım biraz daha.
Iran just stated that they are going to hit very hard today, harder than they have ever hit before. They better not do that, however, because if they do, we will hit them with a force that has never been seen before. Thank you for your attention to this matter. President Donald J. Trump.
The rhetoric signals maximum deterrence and maximum risk as the crisis edges closer to a broader confrontation. China strongly condemned the US-Israel strikes that killed Iran's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, calling them a serious violation of sovereignty and urging an immediate halt to military operations to prevent further regional escalation.
On China's reaction to military strikes launched by US and Israel on Iran, Mandarin. The attack and assassination of Iran's supreme leader was a serious violation of Iran's sovereignty and security, and a trampling of the purposes and principles of the UN Charter and the basic norms of international relations. China firmly opposes and strongly condemns this action. We urge an immediate cessation of military operations, avoid further escalation of tensions, and jointly safeguard peace and stability in the Middle East and the world.
Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning highlighted risks to Gulf states and global stability, rejecting claims linking China to supplying Iran with CM-302 missiles and urging all parties to reduce tensions through diplomacy.
On reports, China and Iran are close to reaching agreement on purchase of CM-302 supersonic anti-ship missiles. If delivered, these would be among most advanced weapons China has supplied Iran, Mandarin. The report is untrue. As a responsible major country, China has always fulfilled its international obligations. China opposes malicious hype and hopes that relevant parties will do more to ease tensions.
Budget was estimated.
Iran retaliated with widespread missile and drone strikes on Israel, while US bases in UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq, and Kuwait were reportedly targeted. Beijing also stressed the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz, warning that disruptions could threaten global trade and energy security. Over 555 fatalities and 131 affected Iranian cities have been reported. China evacuated more than 3,000 citizens, condemned the death of a Chinese national, and provided consular assistance, reflecting both humanitarian concerns and geopolitical stakes. Iran's retaliation is expanding across the Middle East. Iran-backed militias in Iraq have launched drone and rocket attacks targeting US bases in Erbil, sending projectiles streaking across the skies near the airport. Explosions were reported as air defense systems near the American base fired interceptors. The attacks come just hours after the United States and Israel launched massive strikes across Iran that reportedly killed Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei.
In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, the 10th wave of Operation True Promise. 4 began with the illumination of Khyber missiles, opening massive gates of fire toward the occupied territories. A targeted attack on the government complex of the Zionist regime in Tel Aviv, attacks on military and security centers in Haifa, and an attack on East Jerusalem were among the objectives of the 10th wave. Previously, we had warned about the
You can support the channel by subscribing. It's free. You can support the channel by subscribing. It's free.
expansion of attacks on bases and the occupied territories of the aggressive enemy, and had already announced this. The sound of sirens in Israel will never stop. Now we advise the residents of the occupied territories to stay away from the vicinity of military bases, security centers, and government facilities, and to immediately leave the occupied territories. The occupied territories that Netanyahu's government has forced you to live in have now become places of death and destruction.
The umbrella militia network, calling itself the Islamic Resistance, claimed responsibility. The group says the attacks are revenge for US and Israeli strikes on Iranian territory. Exploding drones and rockets were launched at American installations in northern Iraq. There were no immediate reports of casualties from the Erbil attack.
الرياضة الآن على الهواء مباشرة. يبدو بأن هنالك صواريخ سقطت على الأرض. نعم، يبدو بأنه لا أدري لن أؤكد أو أنفي، ولكن آخر نستطيع أن نراه الآن على الهواء مباشرة وميض للمزيد من الانفجارات. والآن تتم هذه كلها صواريخ باليستية أو صواريخ كبيرة يتم إطلاقها من قبل الإيرانيين قريبة جدا على مدينة القدس. انظر إلى هذا الوميض، دفاعات جوية كبيرة جدا الآن على الهواء مباشرة، وذلك في محاولة ليست القبة الحديدية، هذا أشبه بالعدوية وذلك بسرعتها. هذا صاروخ باليستي، هذا الذي تستطيع. انظر للصاروخ الباليستي، هذا هو الصاروخ الباليستي، هذا هو الصاروخ الباليستي. أنه تم إطلاق الصاروخ. هذه عملية الاشتباك الثاني، صاروخ شرقي وصاروخ غربي. هذا الانفجار الذي تراه انفجار كبير، أما صاروخ فلسطيني ينفجر الآن على الهواء مباشرة.
You can support the channel by subscribing. It's free. You can support the channel by subscribing. It's free.
Birkaç metre yakınınızdaki yeni insanlarla tanışmak ister misiniz? Sol çili hemen indirin ve sınırsız
Arkadaşlar ekrana bir çift tıklayalım. Kanala abone değilsek abone olalım ya. Bu zor değil. Ücretli de değil yani. Yayını desteklemek elinizde. Kimseden para da istemiyor. Şurada bir komik herhangi bir şey olsaydı herkes beğenirdi. Abone olurdu. Enteresan bir insanlarız. Hop geliyor. Bam bam. Maşallah. İran'a. Bam. Ne vurdu be? Şimdi 4 kişiyiz. 4 beğeni var. Maşallah. ...27 kişiyiz. 4 kişi like yapmış. Ne kadar birbirimize yardım etmeyi seviyoruz. O yüzden hiçbir şey olmaz. Çekemeyiz. Çok kötü bir şey. Yayınları vermeye gerek yok.
אימא'לה! מה אני רואה באלוהים? הלך משה ברקת! מה אני רואה? אימא'לה!
שיו, זה הכי מרשים שהיה עד היום. כן, זה קרוב.
אימא'לה! מה אני רואה באלוהים? הלך משה ברקת! Oh my god. She looked. Oh my god. Now look like. Oh my god.
זה היציאה, עדי. וואי, זה נראה כמו זיקוקים. וואו, איזה יופי. אמא, לב, נופלת. וואו.
Güçler tabii nasıl yaklaşacak?
Şu dakikalarda başkent Tahran'da hava savunma sistemleri bir kez daha aktifleştirildi. İsrail'in saldırısına karşı koymaya çalışan hava savunma sistemlerini görüyoruz. İşte hava savunma sistemleri İsrail'den gelen saldırı tehdidini bertaraf etmek için yoğun bir mücadele veriyor. Bununla paralel olarak eş zamanlı İsrail'in başkenti Tel Aviv'de İran füzeleri tarafından hedef alınıyor. İsrail'in başkenti Tel Aviv İran füzeleri tarafından hedef alınırken İsrail'in başkent Tahran'da yapmak istediği saldırı anlık olarak İran hava savunma sistemleri tarafından havada etkisizleştirildi. Şu dakikalarda başkent Tahran'da hava savunma sistemleri bir kez daha aktifleştirildi. İsrail'in saldırısına karşı koymaya çalışan hava savunma sistemlerini görüyoruz.
مسيرة يا شباب مسيرة اضرب اضرب اضرب اضرب اضرب اضرب اضرب اضرب اضرب اضرب عجل السيارة دي يا شباب